Okay, hello to everybody who's viewing this video. I'm going to give us a little bit of an introduction and why we're here and who we are. My name is Leanne Foell, and I have Linda Miller here with me, who also just happens to be my mother. We're both MSW graduates. Right now, I am a therapist in Dallas. I'm actually in my Dallas therapy office right now at Bright Space Therapy, and Linda is there in Boise, Idaho. And we are going to talk a little bit about a school proposal. My mom, Linda, actually asked me to come on here and have a conversation with her so that she could get a chance to put this information out there and get it shared. So tell us a little bit about the purpose of the video, Linda.
So the purpose of the video is to inspire more research into this idea that I'm going to propose, and to encourage educators to consider how this progressive style of education might fit with kids in their programs who experience developmental and complex trauma or behavioral challenges. So
Okay, sweet. And you've got some other resources we're probably going to refer people to outside of this video, right?
yeah, I have a website, Teach There a Bridge, where I outlined a lot of the ideas, and where people can make comments there, and also they can make comments on the video when they're finished. And
Yes.
we would love feedback.
Yes, comment on this video. We're going to put a bunch of stuff into the video description so you know where to go, like the website. We're probably going to talk about a lot of stuff you might have questions about throughout. So yeah, make comments. You can also communicate with Linda through the website as well. But let's get started. Let's jump in. Tell us like first a little bit about um, the history that's led to this idea, like why this idea, where's this even coming from?
Yeah, so why use Reggio Emilia approach for kids with trauma? The first time I was exposed to Reggio Emilia was in 1990 with my oldest kids that went to a preschool in California that I really have not seen its equal. It was an amazing preschool. It was in Sacramento, um, right in the heart of the district where the state and the city were kind of investing, and it was close to Sac State. So there was a lot of investment in this particular preschool, and um, it was used the Reggio Emilia approach. And then in 92 we moved to Idaho, and when I left I spoke with the director and said, oh, how am I going to find something like this in Idaho? And she said to me, well, maybe you'll bring it with you. And so that really hit
Uh-huh.
home to me, and I thought, okay, I'm going to bring it with me. And that became a lot more difficult than I thought. Idaho is a more conservative state, and um, uh, education's always political. It kind of has to be because it's about the public. So in Idaho, there was more trend towards traditional education with direct instruction, with um, more teacher driven elements. But in the 90s, there still was a lot of choice within the schools. And so there were teachers, there was a lot of energy that was going into education in the 90s, and people were trying to do various different things and try out all kinds of teachers had the freedom to do that in their classrooms. So there was a
Like
lot
different
of diversity.
approaches.
Yeah, different approaches, different emphasis, maybe emphasis on literature or on science or on math. And so parents kind of had the ability within the neighborhood school to request a teacher for their student. And that's what I did for really all of my oldest kids. We should
I
say
remember
I'm an,
I remember you doing it for me.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
I should say I'm an adoptive parent. So I have five biological kids. So um, and they're older, and we adopted in we adopted in 2009. So some of this had shifted by then, and a lot of us know the history in the early 2000s was No Child Left Behind, and there was a movement towards collecting data which is really positive. There needed to be that because there were schools that were falling behind and crashing. And that needed to be, exposed somehow. But what happened in that is there became this kind of toxic environment of mistrust between parents and teachers, where the option to be in the school as a parent was less and less. The schools became very homogenized as principals. There was this drive to make sure that every teacher was teaching at a quality level.
So at the
But
same
at
type
this,
of
but
approach.
yeah, what that turned into is that they were all really teaching in the same way. So if there was an outlier that needed something different, that needed a different approach, you really had to go outside the school to get that. And then now we've got school choice and charter schools and magnet schools.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So that's kind of that was the environment that we came into when we adopted. And it was very difficult to find a placement where they felt comfortable, where they felt safety. Trauma-informed approaches were just barely getting started in other states.
Not
So
Idaho.
there was just a lot of, the school was really a threatening place for them, and it was difficult to get them attend. There was a lot of problems that I was seeing for my adopted kids. So in 2014, I wrote a white paper describing some of the problems that I was having, not just in school, but also in accessing clinical treatment. I was having trouble getting them to clinical treatment. I was having trouble finding somebody that was a good match for them. It was, we were bouncing around from therapist to therapist because I was having trouble with attendance. We'd get, they drop us because we couldn't, I couldn't get them to come in a safe way, and yeah, that's not an understatement to say it was unsafe to get them there. So I wrote this white paper in 2014, and I ended up that got passed around a bit. In the white paper, I offered the idea of Reggio Emilia as a classroom approach. And I offered it as a way to integrate therapies into the school day. And that got passed around, and I ended up on health and welfare's committees, because at the time, health and welfare was going through and they still are going through a process of building out and fleshing out the mental health system in Idaho. And so I was trying to talk to whoever I could about being trauma informed. So I was advocating, I was doing I was doing things like that. I was on these committees. And then in 2015, we really were a family in crisis. The adopted kids were going through adolescence. And we really just, whenever we found something, by the time we found an intervention, they needed something more. So we were constantly behind the 8 ball, and it was just crisis after crisis. And so my efforts really went on the back burner during that time. But in 2019, I went back to school. I got my bachelor's degree. And that's when I developed Teach There Bridge and put the idea out more. And then in 2024, I finished my master's degree in social work. And here we are. So
you went back to school with the purpose of?
My purpose of going back to school was hopefully to meet people. I really wanted to keep sharing this idea. I knew that I needed to learn more about leadership. I didn't know that I need to learn more about evidence base. And I appreciate that learning a lot more than I did at the time I was learning. Because I can see how important it is to build, an evidence around an intervention. And that's one of the purposes that we want to do with this, because we want to share in this video what the evidence shows and what it doesn't show. So
sure. And then search for, hopefully propose, let's find some more evidence on how we can find some interventions that actually work for these kiddos. Cool. So going to school.
Yeah.
Bridge that. Okay, cool. So we have like that setting the background now, why you care, but then also what you
Yeah.
know, like you've seen this firsthand as well. Um, so maybe give us a little bit more of the why of your proposal. You're proposing Reggio Emilia, you're proposing more trauma-informed approach for kids in schools. What problem does your proposal solve? You know, what's the why of coming in here and proposing this?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Um, the biggest why is the behavioral challenges. And this is a challenge not just for parents but and therapists, but certainly for educators. It's a giant challenge because the behaviors
The behavioral challenges in who?
in the classroom in kids that have developmental and complex trauma. And by developmental trauma, we mean trauma that happens during the developmental period of life. And by complex, we mean that it happened over and over again so much that it's changed the architecture of the brain and the way the child sees safety. So there children that have experienced this can be very reactive. They can also be dissociative. So they can have that externalized behavior where they're really not safe in an environment. They're not safe to others. They don't feel safe, and then they're not safe to
Throwing
others. They
things.
throw things. Yeah, they hurt other students. And also that internalized behavior where they are shutting down and not paying attention and can't learn. Um, that's definitely a block to their learning. Um, so with this, we want to increase. These are kids that need their window of tolerance increased and their ability to regulate
Yeah.
increased. Um, these are kids who've experienced, abuse, neglect, big attachment ruptures. They might have had time in and out of the home with foster care or adoption, orphanages. They may have experienced the death of a family member, or divorce can often, especially if there's a lot of conflict involved. Medical trauma can also be an issue.
Yeah.
Even trauma that results from developmental delay or autism. We can see, and autism in general, we can see these big behaviors. Um,
Yeah.
and another purpose is really to relieve demands on teachers, because teachers are with public education, we have a mandate that we're educating everyone. And so we're asking teachers to care for kids who maybe just left an inpatient facility
Oof,
or
yeah.
just the night before experienced a significant trauma, or who they're currently experiencing trauma. They're homeless, or they're
Yeah.
experiencing neglect, and we certainly want to identify those kids and get them into treatment, but we also want support in the classroom.
Yeah. And the
So,
teacher's there to teach math. And they didn't maybe
yeah,
know or get the training for teaching math to somebody who is feeling all these things or experiencing all these things. So yeah.
yeah. Yeah, the teachers really need the support, and that's what I'm hearing from teachers that I talk to,
Me too.
is how I need support.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, we I would like to see a way to integrate some interventions into the school day, like DBT, which you're aware of, the
Yeah.
DBT skills, the dialectical behavior therapy, emotional regulation skills, motivational interviewing, um, art, music, literature that supports their thing, and
Therapeutic stuff.
therapeutic things that can be. We're already doing that in the schools a little bit, and we'll talk about that. But this is a way that we can do it more. And um, another goal of this using Reggio Emilia is to fill gaps in their learning created by these trauma reactions, where
Mm,
they're dissociating, or where they're having to be taken out of the class because of behavior, and they're missing so much instruction that they're left with these gaps in learning, or they're
yes.
and plus the gap of just not having a strong base, and we'll talk
Yeah.
about that as well.
So
um
the teacher's not only experiencing, I need to help this kid behaviorally and emotionally, but they're also behind academically because the behavioral emotional stuff has caused these gaps. So your proposal helps to relieve that.
Yeah, it gives you're giving the opportunity for a kid to refill some of those gaps, and we'll talk about the mechanism why we can do that with Reggio Emilia.
Yeah,
And we
yeah.
want to make a real difference in kids' lives and not just pass them on to the next grade.
Which is what's happening, the problem that's happening.
Yeah, because they need to
Yes.
be with their peers. They need to be with kids who, who
Yeah.
are somewhat their age. And Reggio Emilia gives a really natural way of differentiating instruction so that they can be with their peers and
Yes.
still
Yeah.
in a helpful way.
Yeah, and we've seen the effect of if this student can't thrive in the classroom and they're forced to be out of the classroom and not be able to have that connection with peers, that also impacts the student and the child as well for all those social and emotional learning and growing and developing. Yeah, that's not good
Yeah.
either. So, um, okay, cool. So the proposal is to help these students that are struggling with complex and developmental trauma to have success in the classroom because right now, gaps, teachers who don't have the capacity or the resources to help them, and all those behaviors that are getting in the way of them having a good experience, so they don't just get passed off. Big
Yes.
big feat. I feel like we're talking about it, and it's like what I hear a lot of teachers here in Dallas, Texas, talking about. How do we help these kids? We're struggling. We don't know what to do. We feel like we're just passing this off. So, big problem to solve. Good needed problem to solve. So let's go into a little bit more about the proposal. Like, what are you proposing? Tell me about it.
Okay. There's two parts to the proposal, and one is a standalone. The simplest intervention is the standalone therapeutic classroom that's team taught by a professional teacher and a therapist.
Okay.
And this
So a
is this
standalone
is is
classroom
taking
that's
place, yeah,
taking
in
place in a school that already exists.
yes, in your neighborhood school, in your charter school, yeah, in a school that already exists. And we're taking one or two classrooms and we're saying, okay, these are going to be mixed age classrooms that we're going to help kids. And we're trying to maintain a 4-to-1 ratio. So we have about 16 kids with the two teachers and with two volunteers. And one of those volunteers can be a parent and one could be a university student.
Very cool.
So, yeah, we're just really doing a lot with that. And we'll talk about, how we're helping that university student and how we're helping that parent.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we're supporting in the classroom. They're just multitasking in so many different directions. This classroom would use the Reggio Emilia approach, and it would integrate as many therapeutic elements into the school day as possible. So by that, we're meaning while we're learning math, while we're learning literature, we're also learning about emotional regulation, and we're also learning about, social engagement and and all those things we're doing it at the same time.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, the second part of this proposal is an actual standalone therapeutic day school. So an intensive outpatient,
Okay.
basically, school where they're going to school, and the school is Reggio Emilia, and we have Reggio Emilia classrooms, but we also have more um, parts of uh, we have more therapies that we can integrate into the um, the school day because we have a bigger facility. So let me
Okay.
share. This is a good point to share my screen
Yeah, yeah. Let's see it. As
and
you,
see these pictures.
yeah, as you're pulling that up, I feel like it's just making me think of a lot of the parents that I work with out here that are like looking for intensive outpatient places, but then they're really discouraged by the academic experience that their kiddo um, or their student gets from the intensive outpatient. So this is interesting to hear an IOP or intensive outpatient that's also putting a lot of effort and resources into the academic experience of the child too, or the
Yeah,
student.
I'm realizing we kind of jumped ahead a little bit, but here's what
Okay.
I mean by that therapeutic school environment, where
Okay.
we're offering other things besides just the Reggio Emilia classroom. We're also offering them time, to have an experience, doing some of these other bottom up therapy experiences, which is bottom up. By bottom up, I mean the brainstem. I'm working on large muscle. I'm working on, that kind of thing, which is actually integrating the brain. Integration is just a huge word. I recently read some things from Dan Siegel about integration, and we're integrating at so many levels with this approach. As to see you here with parents, we've got parents in that environment, and we could still bring in, on the right, there is a play therapy room. We'd still have the option of individual therapy in that environment.
Yeah. The resources for therapeutic intervention are more vast, with it being the whole school, but it's also more purposeful of being integrated with the academic part too, that they're happening at the same time. These are helpful
Yeah.
visuals to see what that look like. I mean, gardening, I don't think, I mean, I think people do gardening in schools, but that's a really great example of both of these happening at the same time. What a mindful activity, while
Mm.
also scientific and creative and all of those things.
Yeah, and we're not saying to the kid, "You have to do these things." They're
Okay.
offered and they sign up, and that's part of Reggio Emilia, actually, is part of the structure and the system is that kids sign up for an activity. Like, there's a place on the, "Oh, I'm gonna put my name on here." There's so many
Oh,
things they're
cool.
learning when they're doing that. They're planning, they're they're writing, they're learning how to write their
Yeah.
name. You know, um, I don't think we mentioned that we're talking about elementary students here for whom
Sure.
this interventions in general, therapeutic interventions that pull them out don't exist. This is, where this exists on the continuum is something that we just haven't touched, at least not here in Idaho.
Okay. So I'm wanting to ask you now more about Reggio Emilia itself. Do you want to start telling us a little bit? You started going into there's like choice, but
Yeah.
what other um what other elements of Reggio Emilia um meet kids' needs, or meet these students' needs, and why Reggio Emilia for these particular students?
Well, let's start with Reggio Emilia, a little bit of history of Reggio Emilia.
Yeah.
Reggio Emilia is actually the name of a town in Italy
Okay.
that was land blasted by World War II. And so they needed to recover from all of this trauma when this is, so
Oh,
this is, post
started
World
with
War
trauma.
II. It started with trauma. So it is very core. It is trauma informed, even before we understood what trauma
Yeah.
informed meant,
That's
because
cool.
these were adults and children who were building their lives again out of, such an horrific experience. So I would encourage people to Google search Reggio Emilia and look into everything they're doing. It's an approach that is international. It's not just in Italy or in the United States. It's all over the place. It's very common. It's very commonly used in preschool, but it's an approach that for this particular population at the elementary school level seems really logical to me because of all of the gaps and the things that they haven't learned yet. So
Developmentally. Yeah. Yeah.
developmental, yeah, where they are developmentally. Um, one element of Reggio Emilia that matches with a trauma-informed approach is seeing the child as a capable and curious learner.
Hmm.
This is a core belief that children aren't empty, that they're not empty vessels,
Hmm.
that they're capable of being curious and they have an innate potential for learning. And a lot of times that the stigma with kids with such behaviors is that they don't have that anymore. But the truth is they really do. They have the ability to see and notice what they need and to find safety. And that's what they're trying to do in a way that's not very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Very, very strength based, very human centered. Yeah.
Very human-centered, very it's inquiry based. So we're building the curriculum off their inquiry. That's a little bit difficult for people to understand. So I encourage them to look into that to see what we mean by an inquiry based curriculum.
Okay.
It's child-centered. The next element is in Reggio Emilia is relationships. It's a very relationship-driven system.
Okay.
And we know from research that relationships, from research coming in many different directions, that it's relationships that help us to heal trauma.
Yeah.
So and positive relationships with a lot of
Sure.
meat to them. The Reggio Emilia approach emphasizes relationships between parents and teachers and children. So there's a strong element of the parent being a core part of the system. And that's really what I experienced and what I learned. It was very beneficial for me as a parent to be there watching teachers in action and
Yeah.
and modeling for me how to interact with my child. So imagine that for the parent who's likely traumatized by their child and by their own history. Imagine what that means for them to be in an accepting environment, seeing a teacher model to them something that's effective for their child. So we're
They're getting
using the
parent
relation. Yeah,
education at the same time.
yeah. In Reggio Emilia, they use the relationship to motivate the child to engage. They're not
Okay.
there's no threat of withdrawal of the relationship. They're using a provocation is what they call it in Italian. It doesn't translate very well to English, but it means an invitation. So what would happen if, and we're inviting them into
Mm.
the next thing. We're seeing the level at which they're working, and this is another advantage of it we'll talk about later, is we're seeing the level at which they're working, and we're saying what will happen if. So we're giving kids quite a bit of choice in this environment, which is a little bit scary to
Sure.
teachers to give this level of choice, because how will they be structured?
But a
And
huge component of trauma informed care. I mean,
yes,
it's choice, choice, choice. So that part makes sense.
yeah, and the way we have the structure is that structure shifts to the environment. And so in Reggio Emilia, they'll talk about environment being the third teacher. So that everything in the environment is supporting and drawing them into what needs to happen. And this is where I need to share the screen again.
Yeah. Show us an example.
So let's go back here to environment as the third teacher. So what you're seeing here is especially on the right, you're seeing different centers where a child can see the activity that could happen there, like with
Yeah.
the sand tray. It looks like in the back, there's an opportunity for literature. There's a play in the far back. There's
Oh,
dress up clothes. This is probably for younger children that would be doing dress up. And that's a literacy thing that they could then write a story from. And the child is giving some choice. It's kind of it's a forced choice, because you have a choice of these six activities, 4 to 6 activities.
sure.
And when it's full, if some of the activities might only hold 4 kids, so when that's full, put your name on the list and you can do it later, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And you can see this child in the center where he's have time, this choice time in the during this course of the day might last an hour and a half to 2 hours. And here's this child just working on this activity for really as long as he needs to. And then there's children in the background who are engaging with each other. So
Mm.
they can do things as an individual. They can do things themselves if that's what they need to do. They can watch and observe other kids because they don't feel safe yet. They also have the freedom to do that, which is really important. It might feel like they're doing nothing, but then there's that gentle invitation to come. Hey, would you like, as they see things that look attractive and they
Yeah.
start to feel safe, to come and join the activity. um, and we haven't talked about data collection. Data collection would be the next thing about
Mm.
Reggio Emilia that's really important, is that you'll see on the left here, we've got, this is an object, we'd call it, that the child has, something that the child has created, and then it's hung up, and pictures would be collected of that. The data would be, and that's how the data really is collected. You'll see in the next picture up on the wall, there's these green tabs, and the child can look and move their, I finished with this activity. After each activity they finished, and that's the way that the child, or their child, participating in collecting the data about what they've
Oh,
accomplished. It's motivation, and we don't, it's not really a behaviorist thing where you have to turn a certain number of these over, or sorry, you didn't do what you're supposed to do today. It's more a thing of like, this, I'm collecting data on what I
yeah.
accomplished.
Tracking.
I'm tracking, yeah, what I've done, and then the adults in the room can see that and know what to form their invitation around.
Right.
On the left here is another example of students' work that would have been collected in a picture, and that data would, all of that data is then collected about that child, what they've done, and then that can be stored all in one place and then shared with the parent teacher conference. Here's what we
Oh, yeah.
see your child doing. Here's a child who formed this array, this. So
Mhm.
some mathematical, and it looks like some integration too of literacy and math, where they've got things stuck on anyway, some really interesting things that
Yeah.
kids can do. And then at the bottom is example of an art center where they are invited, and they're even, looks like the picture is
Oh,
even giving them like a indication of what people do in that center.
yes, like a model, an example.
Yeah, so there's some ways that environment is the third teacher. um
Great. Yeah, and ways that data is collected. That goes a
yeah.
lot. I think that's where I hear what I think other, teachers and even school ad would hear, like, oh, like data. I hear all my teacher friends talking about, like, one of the harder parts about helping these students in the classroom is they don't have enough time to write down all the data, because they also have to teach other students and they have to do this. But if the data collection is morphed into the intervention and everything, I could see that feeling like a relief on teachers, because I know they're
Oh yeah.
constantly talking about gathering data on these students is really hard and it's really important too. So that's interesting to hear that
Yeah.
that's a part.
Well, teachers are spending a lot of time in direct instruction, so they don't have time. So in Reggio Emilia, the role of the teacher really is to set up the environment and to observe and to invite.
Yeah.
So they're freed up really to do a lot of observation. I
Yeah.
would give you an example where it looks like they're doing nothing. There was a wanted teacher that we managed to find at a charter school, that you'd walk into his room and he'd be sitting at his desk. Just, it looked like doing nothing,
Yeah.
but he wasn't. When you when he engaged with you, you could tell he, oh, here, I need you to do this because here's what is happening with this child, and here's what, and so there's, and he could direct. Oh, that, I guess it's the other responsibility, is to direct volunteers
Yeah.
which way to go. So the other purpose that I wanted to get to, really, and you're already starting to feel it, I hope, is to create this efficiency.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
Efficiency, and let's talk about the parent first. The efficiency for the parent.
Okay.
So for the parent, we've streamlined the day. In the case of the therapeutic day school, well, I only have one intervention that I've got to drive them to, and they want to go there. So it's easy to get them in the car and get them to go. And I get to go and be with them and have a good time there. So,
All in
so
one.
all in one. And So that's a lot. And I'm getting supported with parent education.
Oh,
Now,
wow. Yeah,
efficiency,
even more.
yeah, even more. So I know what to do when I go home as well. So for the therapist, the efficiency is missed appointments because
Happens
you,
often. And I can speak personally
yeah,
to that, who sees clients, and that are struggling with these things, and yeah, missed appointments
yeah.
all the time.
Because if a child isn't ready to engage, you just move on to the other child,
Yeah.
and
Or
and you,
something unsafe happens that week, they don't want to go anywhere. Like they don't, like they don't, they know I don't know. They know therapy is this like extra thing they have to do, and they already feel overwhelmed by the hard thing that
mm,
happened that week. So I can see, yeah, that streamlined all being one place. You don't miss
yeah,
appointments.
and the child has the freedom to miss some of the things if they need a more opportunity for regulation, which they're not missing anything because they're learning how to regulate. And there's
Yeah.
going to be, because of the differentiation within the classroom that we just witnessed, the opportunity to learn that thing doesn't go away. It's still going to be there when they come back, when they're
Yes.
ready. So it's,
Yeah.
yeah, so efficient. You can work with kids you couldn't effectively work with before. So kids that couldn't get in the car and come to you, now they have hopefully a way that you can work them. So
Yeah.
we're multitasking building that relationship, which takes so long,
Yeah.
with play therapy or with any other kind of therapy that we're working with. It takes such a long time. Just
Yeah.
once a week, there really is. I That's part of what inspired this idea, is just thinking about the math of, oh my goodness, once a week, and I can't get him
Blip.
there. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a blip.
Yeah.
How does
Yeah.
this ever overcome all of the other hard things that are happening all the rest of the day?
Right, right.
So,
Well, I even think too, the other thing that popped my brain is I, as a therapist, take a lot of um, time to focus on my room being safe, and that there's toys and there's fidgets and maybe even a scooter, like fun things to do, but they're only in that place for like 40 minutes once a week. And so it takes so much longer to get comfortable versus this classroom that they love and they're comfortable in, and it's safe. Oh, and I'll see a therapist in this safe space. Like, yeah, it takes a lot of time to build that as a therapist with
yeah,
students, and that would be efficient out of
it
school.
would be efficient. And so if we could find ways for them to have individual therapy as well in the neighborhood classroom. I'm not sure how that would work, but definitely in the therapeutic day school, you could do that too, because there are some things you wouldn't want, to work on when they're
In the
in
classroom.
the classroom, but
Yeah, yeah,
there's a mechanism for you to form a relationship with them outside
yeah.
of the therapeutic
That's
office
true. You're in the classroom.
because you're in the classroom.
Yeah,
So, um, now for the child, we talked about therapeutic dosing a little bit. That's a benefit to them, and that's actually a research question for me, is that I would put out there, is that how much would this increase therapeutic dosing to be able to have them there every day, and would they approach that like I'm guessing that they will, with
yeah.
anticipation and wanting to do it. So certainly for the child, it's going to reduce anxiety. It's hopefully going to reduce interfering behaviors. That could be another research question, is
What do you mean
how,
by that?
um, so hopefully having them see so much safety in the environment can bring down that reactivity, so that we don't have those interfering behaviors happening as often. I think they still will happen, but we have a method. We're going to talk about next the methodology for handling that.
Okay.
Um, and we have the freedom during the day to handle it. We have more people. We have a 4-to-1 ratio, so for the child, we have a lot more support. Another bit that's happening for the child is filling the gaps in learning, and I'm going to share a screen again for that.
This is what will be when we're talking about efficiency for the child. Yeah,
Efficiency for the
part of their
child.
efficiency, or for the student, is that they're going to get some of these gaps filled.
Yeah, they're going to get some of these gaps filled. So I want to show this little
Like
metaphor.
academic gaps. is what we're talking about.
Academic. We're talking about academic gaps, but we're also talking about attachment and social emotional learning that should have happened when they
Oh,
were
in
when they were
preschool,
babies and
kindergarten.
preschool. Yeah, so really, really young. So here we have this little model here. The left would indicate um, a child who's not experienced trauma in a Reggio Emilia classroom where there's this big base of learning. And the one on the right would indicate a child who's experiencing traditional preschool and kindergarten, first grade,
Okay.
where we're still adding vertically, because learning is often sequential, and we'll call that vertical learning, where it builds on itself. We have to learn something before I learn the next thing, but we're
Oh yeah.
also learning horizontally, that just means that we're applying all these different diversities of things that we're learning about. So
So these are students without developmental or complex
yeah,
trauma, what it looks like to learn in those two different
yeah.
environments.
So now I have a student on the right with developmental and complex trauma who's trying to learn. Notice they're still at this level 3 blocks high, but they've got these gaps where
And
I don't understand attachment. I don't understand relationships. I maybe have a narrow experience with what is out there in the world with people, how they work with each other, how they do. And so we move that child on because it appears that they're at grade level, right? We move them on even if they don't appear that way, because they need to be with their peers. And now we've got an older kid where they're still it's tipping. The blue blocks and the tongue depressors represent how much the child needs to be scaffolded by people helping in the environment. By now, maybe maybe they have an IEP, they have people, if they're lucky and
resource
yeah,
teacher or
they have a
something,
resource teacher, they have maybe a 1-to-1 aid if the behavior is bad enough.
or a
That's
counselor that they often see, that they have to often go
Yeah.
to day.
Yeah, so that's happening, but now they're missing time, right, from the school instruction, because the school instruction is so hierarchical, right, that if I'm missing pieces because I'm gone, there's no way to fill that gap.
Yeah, you
And
really miss, like, meaning
yeah,
missing pieces, like academically, like if I miss a unit or I miss a
yes,
concept, then now I can't continue on. Yeah.
I have no way to fill that. So here we've got more examples of, now we've got a child in the middle, traditional education. Now they're starting to branch out and I can do a little bit more things. But our poor kid, with developmental trauma, we're going to get to the point where, with the next one, where it really is about to fall down, and often does for kids, really, we're dropping out. We're not able anymore to attend school because it no longer is safe for us, or we're being kicked out of school because we're not safe the child isn't safe for the school.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask, is what that looks like when this tumbles. So it looks
Yeah.
like school refusal, or not being able to attend school, or yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like or it could look like someone graduating that really reads at a 4th grade level, or that doesn't really understand numbers, and we're moving them on, and without really a solid base, and scarily, and they haven't dealt with their trauma either, so, or attachment problems.
Right.
So they're
They don't
taking
feel
all of
confident
those
in
with
the
them.
world around
Yeah,
them.
all of those things are going with them as well. So, um,
So these are those gaps.
yeah. I really like this little model too, to compare progressive versus traditional. Um, and this was from Teacher Head, and this was a model that they were kind of thinking through at a private school. So this is how they would explain why they valued traditional education. And they said, well, the kid at home and in preschool, they're coming to us, from families where they have, good experiences, and they've got these roots, right? They arrive at us at kindergarten, preschool, And now let's just do hierarchy. Let's just do ABCs, bum, bum, bum. And now once I can read and write, now I can branch out and do these other things.
Mm.
So what we're saying in Reggio Emilia is that we're going to use all of these things. We're going to use science, we're going to use art, we're going to use social emotional learning. We're going to use all these things to learn numeracy and literacy.
Where in this model, those things are the leaves. You can't get to those until you do the trunk first. But you're trying
Yeah.
to flip that, where it's like, well, let's use the enticing feeling of the leaves to build a foundation,
Yeah.
to build the stuff that, yeah.
Yeah, we're saying we're building like come back to this model here where we're going to build it all at once. We're going to go straight up. We're going to build as much. We're going to fill these gaps. We're going to give you time for this kid. Unfortunately, we're talking about elementary school, so we're talking
Right.
about this kid and this kid. We're going to give them some time to just work on attachment.
Yeah.
We're going to give them time to just work on
Trusting a teacher
trusting
and
people.
interacting with that teacher. Yeah.
Yeah, and in the meantime, they're learning how to read and write because there's these fun activities. They're not laborsome, they're not drudgery, they're fun, and
Yeah.
we're learning. Yeah, we're it's a literacy based curriculum, so we're using literature to to move it forward. So
While also filling those gaps in social emotional learning or attachment and
yeah,
relationship stuff. Okay, so I know you addressed this, or you mentioned this earlier. It's probably a big question on a lot of people's minds who have worked in schools with these students, and those behaviors that often come up. This this space and this proposal is meant to alleviate, right, and create some safety. But when external or internal behaviors do happen, how is discipline handled? Like, what is the behavioral intervention? Um, and is there behavioral interventions that don't fit with this model? What does
yeah.
the proposal have to say about that discipline and handling that?
So Reggio Emilia within there were some things that there was kind of some friction between behaviorist models of education and or of handling behavior and certainly from a trauma form lens. We're trying to move that behaviorist theoretical lens to include trauma informed. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater because there's a lot of things about things like applied behavioral therapy. All those things are valued. There's some evidence behind them. And I will say with ABA, the evidence is about improving individual behaviors. It's not that we don't have evidence that it heals trauma.
Okay.
We have some evidence that it actually might poke at trauma and make it worse. And so from Reggio Emilia, we're using that provocation, that inquiry base, that trying to draw them into. So naturally, we're creating safety in the environment in the way that we're speaking to them. So there's that proactive thing that's happening, but we do need a reactive intervention as well. I would propose that the behavioral interventions that don't fit with Reggio Emilia, a token economy when it's used for everyone in a homogenized way, or a punishment and reward when it's used for everyone as a school-wide policy is not going to be they're just going to immediately put their guard up. It's threatening. They're going
Those
to see
attachment
that as a threat. Yeah,
students are going to be poked by that. Yeah.
they're going to be poked by that quite a bit, and it also creates manipulation in both ways where the child is now trying to manipulate the system. I mean,
Use
they're
it as
being
a
manipulated.
power struggle, and I can see adults doing the same thing on accident. It becomes a power
Mhm.
struggle with those.
Yeah, there was some really interesting evidence that came out of, or some results that came out of studying token economy at a residential treatment center, and we'll
Oh,
put that in the and where where they were saying some of these things, saying, well, we're doing this just because we want to get out of here and we don't want to be stuck here anymore, not
Yeah.
because we're learning. So
Yeah.
super interesting stuff. But my proposal is that we use, because we do need we need behavior responses that are trauma informed and consistent with this approach. And the one that I would recommend is TBRI, is
Okay.
trust-based relational intervention. And there's a high amount of evidence around that. They're constantly doing studies. This is the international. The intervention has become international. It came out of Texas Christian University. Karen Purvis was the director at the time. I got a chance to meet her at one
Very
point, and it
cool.
was, yeah, fascinating. She's passed away, and so
Sure, sure. She's from over here in this neck of the woods, though, TCU. That's over here. So I've run into
yeah.
people who understand and learned this as well.
I encourage people to go and look that up and figure out and find out what those different principles are, because they definitely, the way that we're interacting, the way we're helping kids regulate before we come in with a correction, the way we're working on connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're doing that first, and using relationship. You can see how it just really marries with a Reggio Emilia approach really well. And so, I mean, really, what is the goal for our children? It's not only to behave better, we want them to have good mental health as well.
Yeah.
So,
So this intervention is to help them to have both. If there's a behavioral
yeah,
issue in the classroom, that they're able to learn and grow in that behavior while also being trauma informed and getting the help that they need. Yes,
yeah,
and that is the question I get from teachers and school counselors and districts out here all the time is how do we do that? They want this. I hear schools saying, "Hey, we have kiddos who've experienced trauma and we want to do." They're starting to notice we need different behavioral interventions for them. We can't just do reward and consequences and punishment and stuff. And
yeah.
so this is a great thing to start answering those questions a lot of teachers have about how to help these kiddos with behaviors.
That's good that they're noticing that level
Yeah,
of threat that it raises in the kid, and the manipulation that it
sure,
sometimes can bring out.
sure. But they don't, I don't think,
Um,
yeah, the problem is nobody knows what to do with that. They're like, oh, well, okay, I guess we'll just keep pushing them along. Like,
we
yeah,
can't
it's
just do
this, they
nothing.
need
Yeah, I
this.
mean, it's like then it becomes, well, I'm just gonna do nothing because this isn't working, and
Right,
then now
right.
what can
Yes,
I do? I got to do something. Yeah,
exactly. And that's the other example of teachers being like put in a bad situation. Like we need to give them more resources and more stuff to help them with that. So,
yeah.
so I guess that, I mean, that goes into my next question is any expansion or any more explanation from you about what is currently being done for kids with trauma related behaviors in schools? You know, is it this, well, nothing, I throw in my
Yeah.
hands, or what's currently done to address, what's the current intervention maybe?
Um, there is a lot of schools that are becoming trauma informed. That's happening, and they're using TBRI or some other. There's a lot of other models as well, that are great. Students can qualify for an IEP and be have special education, so that can look like, um, that can look like. Sorry, I'm blanking for a second.
That's
Um,
okay.
that can look like a pullout that's only happening a half an hour a week.
Out of the
And
classroom.
yeah, out of the classroom, which means they're not missing the direct instruction as much, but they're still missing some. But they can also do a extended resource room situation where
A
they're
lot of
in a
those.
so they're in a classroom, but they're in it. The problem with the extended resource room, that's good. That's kind of what we're proposing in a lot of ways with this Reggio Emilia classroom, um, is that sometimes there's this, because we're calling it extended resource, there's some stigma that comes around this. It's like, wait a minute, why are you putting me with kids? And we put them in with kids. I don't see anything wrong with this, but
With
if we
different
frame it
abilities.
correctly, but we're putting them in with kids with disabilities, and now they're thinking something wrong with me. Am I disabled? I don't understand why I'm here. And so I think if we're doing that, I do think we could put a lot of kids with various different types of abilities together in a Reggio Emilia classroom and have some success. But we need to, that's only if we're honoring their innate abilities, if we're giving them opportunity to express that. So if we're not, then they're kind of feeling like, oh, what am I doing here?
Shoved in a
And
room,
yeah,
died.
and sometimes what happens is that in the extended resource room is that extended resource room is expecting to have content now from the classroom teacher. And so we're getting the content in the form of just a paper, that he needs to sit down and do. And so it's kind of boring.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Less resources, maybe the quality goes down if
Yeah.
that's happening. And but that's what is being
Current,
used
that's,
right now or currently done.
yeah, if you're lucky. I mean, sometimes,
Yes.
yeah. Um, there's a lot of schools have a calming room too, and that could be
Yeah,
a
I hear more about those.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
There's some ways that they've been used incorrectly in the past, as seclusion and restraint. And I think at least here in Idaho, we have a law against that now, which is positive.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but the calming room can still be used voluntarily by the child, and that can be effective, but then they're missing classroom instruction. So
And
it
it's
with
not a
Reggio,
part of the classroom
yeah,
like in
it's
a
not a
Reggio
part.
Emilia.
Yeah, in Reggio
Yeah, yeah,
Emilia,
yeah.
yeah. Well, and I've seen other classrooms too that aren't necessarily using Reggio Emilia that are trauma informed, that have this
Oh,
calming space.
environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
The more you're talking about it, the more I do see how this is a good fit for kids with other abilities and other disabilities, like autism and things like that. Do you have anything more to expand on that?
Um, I definitely see it working with kids with autism if they have cluster. You might need greater than the 4 with some disabilities, you're going to need greater than the 4-to-1 ratio. So, and that's something that districts can investigate. It makes it expensive, but that's, part of
Need.
what's happening in this environment. Um, I wanted with this, a lot of people are thinking about autism, and I wanted with this video to help people to think about developmental trauma and complex trauma as well, because a lot of the times the symptoms look so similar. It really takes um, it takes a professional to tease out whether it's autism or whether it's developmental trauma. There's some differences. Um, but I think in the Reggio Emilia classroom, we don't necessarily need to know that it's different. We just need to treat them as a capable and curious learner. So, because it's an inclusive environment, the distinct diagnosis becomes less important.
Right,
Um,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. I just interesting to think though about all the opportunity for observation though, as you can distinguish all these, oh, this is how they react in this environment, and oh, this is the feeling that comes up. Maybe it's like this more data for diagnosis and understanding, and then giving them the intervention that they need, hopefully in an environment like that. So
Yeah.
um, all right. I mean, maybe switching gears a little bit, but how does it compare to other progressive models like Montessori? I know people hear the word Montessori a lot, or Waldorf. I know that's a common one, or Adlerian and other models. How does it compare to these other models that are probably talked more about than Reggio Emilia?
It's a good question. Um, so as parents are looking, and if they have a child who's experienced trauma, they're going to ask the question, do they have a trauma informed lens? And
Yeah.
is this school trauma informed? Because we can certainly have a school that has some of these progressive elements and have it not be. So Montessori, the thing that Montessori has in common with Reggio Emilia is this environment as the third teacher.
Oh, oh
But
yeah.
the environment in Montessori is more scripted. So you're actually, can order product, you can have, you have things that are specifically items in the environment that are specifically Montessori. Whereas with Reggio Emilia,
Oh,
there's a little bit more flexibility. And so Reggio Emilia can be a little bit easier to integrate into the state curriculum a little bit better, and to pull in elements with Reggio Emilia that are required in your district or in your state.
maybe
So
this isn't the right word, but then is like Montessori, like it needs to be pure to be Montessori. I'm not sure that's the right
yes,
word, but like it needs to
yes.
like you have to follow all of the so yeah, that's why you have to buy maybe some of the Montessori things.
Yeah, Montessori, to be called a Montessori school, you're sticking to that model in a purist kind of way in order to be, which is nice. They're
Gotcha.
holding on to their
Sure.
the content.
Evidence-based. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the principles in Montessori doesn't really gel well with a trauma-informed approach, and that is that they um, when a child comes into the environment, they encourage the adult rather than having this provocation or this invitation. The adult holds back and waits and allows the child to to watch. And if they're having struggles, then they gradually increase the level of intervention, whether they start by standing close to them or to and so that particular element lacks for the kid with trauma, lacks transparency. So they can walk into the room and not, they can still look around and go, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. You know, there's no relationship and they need relationship. They desperately need to have to look to see what a healthy relationship looks like. And so without that element, the element's there, but not to the extent that it is in Reggio Emilia. So for that lack of transparency, I know that was that was my, and I don't know what the evidence shows here because that's my anecdotal experience with
Oh,
Montessori
okay.
is that it lacked transparency and that my child felt threatened in the environment because they didn't know
They
what to
weren't
do.
getting helped. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they weren't getting helped. So Waldorf is a it's used more for kids that are older. So it's definitely
Yeah.
an elementary kind of, and but middle school, high school, often you see a K or maybe a first grade through 12th school. They're often private schools.
Right.
So they do have the non-directive approach where we've got these maker spaces and we're able to have some freedom to the
Projects and
projects, to have projects to work on things. In Waldorf, a lot of times they're bringing things from the community, people in from the community who are teaching them, which can be really positive. Um, but because it's often set in a private school, um, they can leave kids behind as well because they're trying and they will even advertise like this is the type of family we want, this is the type of student we want.
the
We
student with the base,
Yeah,
right? I
the
mean,
student with the base. Yeah, the student with the base. So, um, yeah, I mean,
leaves kids out maybe
it
or
leaves
other
kids
kids.
out. It can be very exclusive. It can be, um, yeah, I want to say nice things, but I just can't say something nice about it
So
when
then we won't say anything at all, I guess.
when we're not when we don't respond to the need of a child. Um, yeah, I have a problem with that.
Not a
But
good fit. Yeah. Okay.
yeah. Adlerian is really it's a philosophy that was growing out of the same time period when Montessori, Reggio Emilia, all this, um, you know, uh, have
The models.
yeah, all these things were coming about. Um, I wanted to say things in therapy like who Carl Rogers,
Oh,
this person-centered approach. All
yes.
these things are coming. So Adlerian philosophy really aligns with Reggio Emilia. So I've um, had the opportunity to send one of my adopted kids to an Adlerian school, and it basically was Reggio Emilia.
Okay.
Problem is, that, then it's charter, and then there the money, and so it eventually closed, and that became and that's a problem with charter schools is that
Yeah.
how do you maintain them? And it would be so much better. And that took us out of the neighborhood school, that took us out of knowing the friends that
Oh,
were close by. Um, anyway, but all these progressive models include project-based learning, inquiry-based learning, and people can look up and see what that means.
yeah.
Experiential learning, collaborative learning where they're working with other people, personalized, except for Waldorf, personalized learning and differentiated instruction. They include where, each child can work from where they're at, from their level. They all include maker spaces, and they're all child-centered. So
yeah, it's interesting to talk about progressive models in general, just I think in the political educational climate we're in right now. I know a lot of people are talking about education right now, so it's kind of nice to just get a refresher on, well, we've got all these traditional models right now in education. What are the progressive ones? And yeah, it's a nice review of all the different types of learning that happen in a progressive model.
yeah.
So, let's talk about like maybe people's objections to this. Like, what would be a common common one that you've heard to something like Reggio Emilia? What are people fighting back with, or what are some of those?
The first objection I hear out of someone's mouth, and someone's already thinking this, I guarantee, is cost. Because
Oh,
we've got 2 teachers, 2 professionals, and we're only
yeah.
16 kids in a class. That's more expensive. But so is residential treatment. If so
Mm.
is a lot of things.
Maybe one day it could, yeah, balance out the
Yeah.
cost of all these other things for, yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about, and we'll talk about at some point how it fits in, where this fits into the um what do you call it? The continuum of care. Yeah.
Oh,
So,
sure.
so we're thinking about, well, if I didn't have this, then I'd have to have a higher, then they'd have to be on a higher continuum of care, which would also cost a lot of
Costs a
money.
lot of money.
It's
And
just who's
also
paying.
maybe come out of the state's mental health authority's budget, and so it's coming out of
Exactly.
some budget somewhere. Maybe these could be a budget that,
And in the long run, you're shifting funds, but I think it would be cheaper in the
yeah.
long run because it's more efficient. Um, Another objection, of course, is the need for increased training, because we're asking for this
Oh,
teacher to be dually trained in. We want them trained in Reggio Emilia, and we want them trauma informed.
yeah.
So that's a big
And
ask.
then we want a therapist or a clinician trained in Reggio Emilia in addition to their clinical
Yeah.
training,
Yeah. And we want them trauma informed as well, because
of course. Yeah.
yeah, that doesn't always happen either. So
That's true. I made the assumption that every clinician is trauma
yeah.
informed, but that's not true. So
Yeah,
yeah. But yeah, so a
and
lot.
this is a plea to college educators, is that we have
Yeah.
got to have more trauma informed class. You should not be able to graduate
Without.
with
Yeah.
either degree, an
That,
educator or a
oh,
therapist, and have
yes,
not
yes,
experienced a trauma informed
yes.
class.
Well, and part of that class, they could come and observe this classroom or be that extra volunteer
Yeah,
university student. That's where that merges or is integrated. Yeah.
yeah, that's where it is.
Okay.
There's some political objections around progressive education in
Education.
general. And Reggio Emilia sometimes gets unfairly bundled into those. Um, and that is, are we going to teach the curriculum? Are they going to miss
What are
out
they
on?
teaching? What are you, what
Yeah,
are you talking to my, student
yeah,
child about? Yeah.
yeah. How is it going to adhere to state curriculum? And really,
Yeah.
Reggio Emilia blends well with state curriculum because it is unit based. You just put the unit out there. Um, you don't have control over how much they take in from that unit, but
Sure.
you never did.
You
You
never
know,
did before either. Yes.
you never
For
did
this
before.
particular student. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah.
with this particular student, you never did have
That's
control anyway.
true in their current school and in this new school. So why that can't be a complaint because that's the problem. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, but we do have control over whether we're delivering the curriculum, which is all we ever had control over anyway.
Before, true.
Um, Another question: well, how are they going to be motivated? Are you just going to let them do nothing?
Choose whatever they
Because
want all day.
Yeah, because that is, we just talked about that, them being free to just do nothing. They
Just
might need to
observe.
just do nothing and
Yeah,
observe for a while until they're ready to, uh, you know, step into it. And so how will they be motivated? How they're motivated is by relationship, and they're motivated by seeing things that are attractive, and then being treated as a capable and competent learner. So that's highly motivated. And currently, there's a lot of motivation by competition, which doesn't fit with Reggio Emilia. We're being motivated by cooperation, and really the competition for a child that's winning is motivating, right? And the child that's losing it's not. And 50% of people in a competition lose. So this and this person, with a lot of trauma loses most of the time. So competition is not as motivating as you might think it is. So as educators sometimes think it is. So yes, we're going to let them do nothing for a while, but they're going to be super motivated because they're seeing something that's attractive. The next objection, and this is a valid one, is this approach evidence-based?
Yeah, probably a big question.
I could not find, I have done so many different literature studies to try and find the evidence around Reggio Emilia, and it's not very well studied. And I think the reason why is because they're looking at data differently. They're using the data for program evaluation constantly. And that is the definition of an emergent curriculum, is that they're observing and watching, and they're changing. The change process is ongoing for the child because there's so much data to collect that's collected kind of in a more informal ways and casual ways. So the program, so there's kind of the feeling, and I think we need to overcome this, that why should we evaluate it? We already know it works because we're watching it. We're seeing it all the time. So
there's not a lot of data on that.
Yeah.
I see.
I think and this is where the plea is like, we need some data.
Yeah. On Reggio Emilia in general, or Reggio Emilia as an intervention for kids with complex trauma?
Both. We need some data on Reggio Emilia, and especially data on Reggio Emilia for kids with trauma. Is this approach evidence-based, like we just said, for the use with kids with behavioral challenges? The components of it are evidence-based.
Right, like the TBRI and
the relationships are it's having relationship be the driver is evidence-based.
Yep.
Being person-centered is evidence-based. The skills training that we would incorporate into the DBT, all that kind of stuff is evidence-based.
I see.
TBRI is evidence-based. An integrative approach is beginning to be evidence-based. The integration on many levels, my brain, the people around me,
I see. Yeah.
Class, the curriculum,
my play, my learning, my
learning, all the way up clear till the school, integration is happening on so many levels for this. And with that integration, there's some really good information from Dan Siegel about accessing a flow state instead of having chaos or rigidity. And we've all seen chaos and rigidity. We've seen chaos from the kids, and we've seen rigidity in response by the school. By an individual, by the adult in the room, which that's where it drives us, emotionally, to become more rigid or to become more chaotic ourselves. And so I feel like that's another question, is can we access this, can they access it while they're in there? Another question is, can the population be educated together? Which is a really
multiple students with complex or developmental trauma in one room.
Yeah. Are they all just going to blow each other up because, we're all so reactive? And there's some good there's some good studies out of the University of Kansas where they created, I don't know if they used Reggio Emilia or not. That wasn't part of any of the documents that I was reading about the study. That wasn't part of what they were thinking. If they were asking the question, could they be educated together? And they did have some success. They had some problems and they had some success. So we'll put those in the show notes, that information. So that's one of the questions that's coming for me is, will this intervention increase therapeutic dosing like we think it will?
Like we want. Yeah.
Another objection that people have is, I want my kids to, and we've talked about this a little, I want my kids to get the basics like math, reading, and writing. Why can't you just stick to that? That's a common traditional
Hmm.
objection.
I don't want more of this fluffy stuff.
Yeah, and it's valid. Um, and we're back to the block metaphor is like, yeah, but we need a base, we need a base to grow from. And in Reggio Emilia, science, social studies, and social emotional learning, they become the vehicle for learning about math and literacy.
And reading and
Yeah. And then math and literacy become the vehicle for learning about those things.
yeah,
So
that makes sense.
it is a literature-based program. So yeah, there's some challenges with the literature-based program that people might have objections to. And the overall objection is I don't want my kids exposed to, it could be I don't
Oh,
want my kids exposed to other kids that have trauma. I don't want it, but it also could be I don't want my kids exposed to certain literature. I
sure.
don't want, yeah.
We know that argument very well right now. It's being talked about a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. It's talked a lot about, yeah. But really, if they have trauma, they're already
They've
exposed.
been exposed to the biggest
They've
and the baddest. Yeah.
they've been exposed to something dark. And so they need to see that adults acknowledge that there's trouble in the world and that there's helpers and that they see some adults as helpers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing about the book issue, is it's a good one because, but I feel like in the Reggio Emilia program, parents have more freedom and opportunity to um, inspire the curriculum than they do in any other place because they're right
They're
there in the
literally there. Yeah. They can advocate in the moment rather than having to send an email to the, superintendent, to the
room.
district, to the them, and the teacher doesn't answer your email. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then all the way up to the state, and they have to make a law, and then it's all
Yeah.
the way to
Yeah.
national, and then we're
Yeah.
deciding it, and it's just
Yeah.
no. I mean, you have so much more control over what
Yeah.
happens in the classroom because you're there
You're there.
and you're
I'm going to
telling what.
invite them to read and focus on this book right here in front of them and
Yeah,
do it that.
and
Yeah.
I have a really fun example of this that happened because this happened at the school where we were at in California. They had this was in the 90s, and there was the mommy wars, there was the all of that. There was
Work, stay at home.
stay at home, and get married, don't get married. There was all of this issue was happening, and it was happening in the lives of adults. And there were the leader of the person that was putting together actually all of the things for the class.
The environment.
Yeah, she felt strongly that we shouldn't be exposing kids to this dream, of marriage and have it, then it be falling apart. And there were divorced parents, that were there, and the people that were going through big challenges like that, and she was sensitive to them and their needs. And so she insisted that there was a box of dress up clothes that was about weddings, that was pretending you were in a wedding. And
Uh,
she insisted that, okay, this not be here. We're not gonna,
well,
we don't even need this
yeah.
because we have so many dress up things. Let's just use those. And so we did. That's what happened. And then there was 1 week out of the year when she was gone, and a lot of these families were also gone. And so the other instructor said, we're getting out that box of wedding stuff. And they did. And it was out for a week. And the kids, because that rotated quite a bit,
Sure.
that particular center, they
Changes.
didn't think anything of it. They enjoyed it. My daughter enjoyed it the most, probably wore that wedding dress
The
the
wedding
whole
dress.
time. Yeah.
Not me. It's a story about a different sibling, but yes, yeah.
Yes, who
Wanted
was
to
now
play
married
with
with
that wedding
children. Yeah.
dress, but that was their choice. They chose, I want to play marriage.
Yes, her and another individual in the classroom who also came from a more traditional family.
They wanted to play marriage.
They wanted to play marriage, and so they did. And
That's
then
funny.
then it went away when everyone
That's what
came
you're
back,
saying back.
they packed it
Yeah.
up and something else came out, and that was fine. So
There can be
anyway,
flexibility. There
there
can
could
be
be
a bit of both. I see.
there could be a bit of both. There could be, yeah, it could be flexibility.
Maybe another question on people's minds, maybe not like an opposition, but maybe a curiosity question. Is this proposal or this model and rural school districts? I know there's plenty of rural, having a hard time with that word, school districts here in Texas, but definitely in Idaho. What do you think about this model and a rural district?
I think yes, definitely use Reggio Emilia in a rural district, and that's evident by the town of Reggio Emilia,
Was it?
which
It
is
was a
somewhat
rural town.
it was, yeah, that especially at the time when they were bringing this, was coming about. You have some flexibility in a rural town that you don't have in a city. You have the lack of silos in a rural town where you've got people that are jack of all trades. They wear many hats, and they are engaged in education,
Yeah,
more. So you
or your
have some,
neighbor.
yeah, you have some training options where you can train a whole bunch of people with multiple hats all at once.
True. That's true.
Yeah, you have some options for integrating local STEM if it's a farming community, there's a lot of science that you can be in. A lot of science you can integrate. There's so many advantages in a rural district that you don't have in a city.
True,
And
the
so
access to those things feels a
yeah,
little bit.
and there's people who, a lot of people in rural areas do have more of a STEM background because they're engaged in that kind of,
Work.
that's their work. That's the parents that you're getting in to help, that are volunteering and helping. So a disadvantage in a rural area and something, but this is the disadvantage no matter what you do, is stigma and confidentiality.
For that
Um,
student, for that child.
for that child that is having, the big challenges, and the availability of mental health workers.
Yeah.
That's a challenge.
They're already
Um,
outsourcing in small towns to bigger cities for their mental health
yeah,
workforce. So yeah, imagine like
yeah.
be hard.
That's probably the biggest challenge that you would have in a rural district, is how am I going to bring in, someone who has, and it might be someone who has more than one hat. It might be, a teacher who's also trained, yeah, who gets
That
cross trained in something.
program. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
there's some ways to solve the problem, but
Okay.
yeah.
So, okay, we covered a lot of information. We got the problem, we got the proposal, we got some of the components. Reggio Emilia, big thing. We need some research so we can get some more evidence-based stuff out there. But what are you hoping happens now with anybody who's watching this video? What do you want them to do? What do you hope the result of this video is?
Um, I'd like you and invite you to do a Google search about Reggio Emilia and about TBRI and integrative approaches. So get out there, learn some things. Hopefully we inspired that.
Have some
Um,
questions,
ask questions. Yeah. Start thinking about Reggio Emilia approach as a part of the solution to this problem. And then my big plea too is how can we get some evidence?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
hoping we inspire some academic individuals that want to set
Take
up
this
some,
on.
yeah, to take
Yeah.
this on. Yeah.
I'm hoping too, if you're watching this and you've seen a program in your town, community, state that kind of looks like this or could look like this, or a group that's trying to answer the questions we were talking about today, like reach out. Like write a comment, send an email, say, hey, I think we're actually trying to start something similar to this at this school, and we'd love to know where people are already starting to do this stuff or people who want to do this stuff. Share with us if there's anything you're seeing that's similar. I think would be really interesting. But yeah, or send it to other people. Send it to people that are in this field,
Yeah.
wanting to work on these
Yeah.
things. So thanks for answering all the questions. It's fun to do this as two clinicians out there in the world working with kids who have complex and developmental trauma, but even more fun to do it as mother daughter and people with personal experience in their families and in their world. And thank you to whoever is listening. And yeah, look at the video comments, video notes for website information and resources. Thank you for watching.
Okay. Thanks.